Just 2 days out from Donald Trump's inauguration, thousands of protesters opposing the man who will become the 47th US president, have marched through the streets in the nation's capital.
9 US correspondent and my dear friend Jonathan Kersley is there in Washington, D.C. Jono, good morning to you, or good afternoon rather for you. What's the mood like where you are?
Yeah, interesting, because this People's March was expected to be hundreds of thousands of people making their way through the streets of Washington, D.C. up to the Lincoln Memorial. In the end, it was probably a few thousand or so, a crowd far smaller than the same event 8 years ago when Donald Trump was about to become president for the first time. This was a group of people with a mix of concerns. Many of them were women, many of them concerned about reproductive rights they say could be eroded under Donald Trump and the Republicans. There were gender rights issues, but also people talking about wanting criminal justice for Donald Trump. Interesting, given that in just 2 days' time from now, he will be America's 47th Commander-in-Chief. What we got a sense of today on the streets, though, that despite the big win Donald Trump had, winning swathes of American support across the country, is this is still very much a divided country. Not only were there thousands of protesters making their way up to the Lincoln Memorial, but there were also plenty of pro-Trump supporters who have gathered here in Washington, D.C. to see the man they support, the man they voted for, be sworn in as America's 47th president. We spoke to a few of the people from both sides gathered here today. This is some of what they had to tell us.
He's a liar. I'm old school. If you're a liar, you can't be the president of the United States. He's a lying liar who lies about the lies that he's told.
What are you worried about under a Donald Trump presidency?
What am I not, honestly? I would say it has to be abortion rights. As a 19-year-old woman, I don't know what it's looking like if I need protective care.
Why is your biggest issue having to drive to another state to kill your own child?
And how old are you, Angela?
I'm 18.
So you voted in November for the first time?
Yes, sir.
And you voted for?
Trump.
So there, a little bit of the pulse of the people who gathered here in Washington, D.C. You can see some of the Trump merchandise here outside the US Capitol on sale, given the large crowds that have already travelled here for the inauguration, which was supposed to take place on the steps of the US Capitol building behind me. Donald Trump has decided, given the forecast of -5 Celsius down to around about -12, it won't be happening for the first time since 1985. The inauguration taking place inside in the rotunda here at the US Capitol, where the preparations are underway. But outside on the National Mall, where the huge crowds were gathered, well, they're starting the work of taking everything down. It is going to be a very, very different inauguration indeed. Donald Trump will return to this area. He'll go to his golf club in Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. later on tonight, before rallying in front of his faithful here in the heart of America's capital city tomorrow.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan, the last US president to have his inauguration indoors. We know that Donald Trump has tried to emulate Reagan throughout the election campaign. So look, an interesting week ahead, Jono. Thank you so much. Now, endless perimeter fencing, an army of drones and some 25,000 security personnel have converged on the US Capitol ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration this week.
Yeah, it's all happening. The ramped up security measures follow an election cycle marked by violence, including not one but 2 assassination attempts on the president-elect.
To discuss, we are joined by former FBI agent Bobby Chacon in Palm Springs. Bobby, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Firstly, the decision to move the ceremony indoors due to this severely cold weather, that must be such a headache for security for this to happen at such late notice.
Yeah, it is. And I would hope that they had an alternate plan, a backup plan, just in case this happened, because when you're doing the planning, especially with an outdoor event, you do some contingency planning and you say, what if? And that would be, what if we have a snowstorm? And in Washington, D.C. in January, in the middle of our winter, you know, we often do get snowstorms or rainstorms or things like that. So when you're planning on it, so hopefully they had a contingency plan, and then you just have to implement that plan. There is some work going to transfer that, but hopefully they had that contingency in mind when they were planning this outdoor event.
Bobby, contingencies aside, I want to ask you about the scale of the security operation itself. I mean, how does it compare to previous inaugurations?
It's more, and it's right, it's exactly as Allison described it. You heard an army of drones, 25,000 police officers. That's a small army in itself. And so, yeah, this is going to be probably the most protected inauguration in our history, not only because, you know, we have now 2 attempts on the president's life, you know, but we also have Donald Trump, who is a kind of draws kind of that kind of criticism and downright hatred in some cases. So I think that the type of personality that we have taking office, combined with just the technology that can exist today, the fact that he is the target of a state-sponsored terrorism threat that is Iran, has come out and publicly said that they basically put a bounty on his head. So now you have all of these things kind of converging in a perfect storm of potential threats to this event. And so it will have to be the most protected inauguration we've ever seen.
Yeah, it is a dangerous cocktail, Bobby. And there, I mean, as you mentioned, 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump combined with that Iranian plot as well. But with those assassination attempts, they were considered to be, major operational failures by the Secret Service. So is there a lot of pressure on them this week to make sure everything goes perfectly?
Yeah, I think there is. I think they're under a microscope right now because of, like you said, the perceived failures and actually, actual failures of some of those previous events. So I think that they've hopefully learned from those mistakes and moved on. They've done this before. These inaugurations are every 4 years for us. Secret Service is always in charge. So hopefully they have the resources and they've spared no expense to keep this, event safe. Now, the president will be safe. Moving it indoors actually helps with security, obviously. You won't have sniper nests from far away, as we did see in both assassination attempts. But, that doesn't mean that people attending aren't at risk. And people have to remember what we saw in New Orleans on New Year's Eve here. And so, the people simply attending the inauguration could be a threat. So there's softer perimeters and more hardened perimeters as you get close to the president-elect. But certainly there will be soft perimeters as you go further and further away from the actual event venue. And so people attending these other, kind of side events need to take that in mind and need to be very mindful of their security.
Well, you spoke about New Orleans there, Bobby. There was also that Trump hotel incident in Las Vegas as well, the car bomb. How do Americans feel? Is there tension? Are they understandably, I guess, on edge?
Yeah, I think they are. I think, and now what we're doing here, and I'm in Southern California, so now everybody's on edge because of these wildfires. And, that was kind of a natural thing, but it's still a punch to the gut of America. And we're kind of recovering from this, and it's one thing after another. You almost get punch drunk. And so you're flinching at the slightest throw. And so you're kind of, I think we are on edge. Everybody's kind of wondering what this new administration coming in will look like and act like. And so I think there's tension in the air from a number of different sources, natural and man-made, that is making America on edge. And, as we move through this week, hopefully, everybody can calm down. And once we're through the new administration takes place and starts operating, hopefully, things will calm down a little bit and we can get through this period.
Yeah, look, the world is watching, Bobby. An interesting week ahead there in Washington, D.C., and hopefully everyone stays safe. Bobby, thanks so much for your time. And look, today we'll bring you live coverage of Donald Trump's inauguration this Tuesday right here on 9 and also on 9 Now.